Well, guys, turns out a recent wave of bans in D2 has been flooding the internets, sparking commentary from gamers, journalists, and developers across whether this action is appropriate. The bans are so surprising that we felt compelled to weigh in and gather all the data to why exactly these folks were banned. The D2 we're actually talking about today, though, is the Division 2. Now, we caught whiff of this on July the 4th when the Division 2 development team at Massive Entertainment addressed an exploit that allowed players to gain an unfair amount of XP and SHD, that being shade levels. Now, the punishment for players engaging with this exploit ranged from account progression rollbacks and a 2-week suspension all the way to permanent bans from the game. Now, at face value, this seems like it's just a developer stepping in to protect their integrity of their product, that being the game. But I've actually seen this firsthand before. If you remember way back when, Anthem did the exact same thing, and it did not work out well for them. Today, though, I wanted to dive into what this exploit actually was, and then just talk about whether or not these bans were justifiable. Now, to start with the exploit, the Division 2 has been running for 5 years strong now, with multiple expansions, progression systems, and game modes. And at the core of the controversy is Descent, which is a wave-based mode where agents fight groups of enemies with escalating difficulty, with high rewards to match. It mixes roguelite and horde mode elements, and serves as a great test bed for unique builds and playstyles, solo, or even up to 4-player co-op. Now, it's important to note here, players that quit Descent or die before completing the run do not receive rewards. Now, the exploit in question circumvents this high-risk, high-reward structure. And this reached back to several weeks ago. Massive posted a known issue for the game on Trello, stating that Ubisoft Connect allowed players to join in-progress runs of Descent when this feature is meant to be disabled. Now, the issue is actually larger than that. Sending invites to friends from your platform of choice rather than within the game allow players to join. Xbox, PlayStation, and Steam players all have system-level invites for friendly accounts on that platform, making it possible to take advantage of this exploit on any device you have the Division 2 on. Because why would people get banned for joining friends in a co-op activity? Well, joining is only half the exploit. The Descent grants escalating rewards based on progress. Joining a player that's on the first wave will give you nothing. However, if you join a friend that is on wave 20, 30, or 40, now you're earning XP and rewards at that level, which is clearly not what the developer intended. Now, it gets worse. After somebody joins on a high Descent loop, you can immediately quit the game and reap all the XP and shade levels that were earned up to that loop. Altogether, players could skip the entire Descent run and pocket the cash, creating a no-risk, high-reward mode that nobody asked for. So why is this an issue? In many games, a PvE experience farm is relatively harmless. The answer is shade levels, an in-game infinite leveling mechanic that was introduced to Division 2 with the Warlords of New York expansion. For many players, shade level 1000 is an important target to reach, offering substantial buffs to weapon damage, critical chance, damage resist, and much more. All of these benefits are capped at shade 1000. But there's one player stat that isn't: health. Player health can be increased infinitely, albeit in small increments, and Descent just gave everybody a free pass to the top. The issue becomes clearer in the extraction-style PvP Dark Zone. The impact of this shade farm transforms from a harmless PvE farm into a serious competitive issue. Something I think all gamers can kind of understand. Now, with this context, it's much easier to understand why Massive is taking such strong action. Some Division players are celebrating this as a necessary action against bad actors, while many in and outside of the community are baffled that a developer would take such hostile actions against its own community. And again, on one hand, it's absolutely the responsibility of a live service developer to protect their community from cheaters, hackers, exploiters that would intentionally disrupt the experience of others for their own gain. But guys, on the other hand, all of the exploits and questions have been known to the community for weeks, and by the developer for at least as long. All bans and rollbacks are affecting players that have spent at least $60 to play the game, and some of whom are just following the advice of YouTubers and streamers pointing out an efficient way to level their agent. To an extent, this situation is the result of a developer's failure to address known issues, yet the punishment falls on the players that harness them. And look, as someone that plays Destiny 2 literally every day, I get it. This is a complicated situation for any live service or MMO game. Hell, just last week, Bungie quietly set off a wave of bans that happened to affect a number of speedrunners in the PvE community. Granted, those things have been rolled back, but we have cheaters that definitely pop up within the game that Bungie nails down. But I don't think Bungie has ever banned anyone for exploiting something in their game. And believe me guys, we have made so many videos on exploits, whether that was like glitching out of nightfalls or cheesing dungeon bosses. Can you imagine if Bungie banned us for these things? And one thing I really do like about Bungie is their philosophy is, if it's an exploit or a bug within the game itself, it's on them. That's not on the gamer. Now listen, I don't play Division regularly. We have played it in the past, but it's been a while. And at least from what I've seen here amongst veteran Division players, this exploit is absolutely impacting the PvP environment. But the way we look at it, at least outwardly, is that there's no third-party software or hacks involved. I know I'm coming off as like a spoiled Destiny player here, but the 3 ways I've seen this handled by Bungie is 1, if it breaks the game, disable it. 2, if it's not breaking the game, let Guardians have fun until it's fixed. And 3, ban excessive use of exploits either entirely or from certain parts of the game. Option 3 is always the least popular, but they all demonstrate a marked shift in the culture of live games. I remember the RuneScape days of identifying an issue and immediately posting it to a forum or a message board to raise its profile in the hopes that it would be resolved. In the streaming age, raising an issue's profile also means that players will see it and have a chance to exploit it before a resolution is implemented. At the end of the day, if you were a Division player doing this, you were chasing the most effective means of leveling. And look, if I was a Division player, I probably would have done the exact same thing here. Massive is trying to clamp down on something negatively impacting their community, but I have seen this firsthand blow up in a developer's face. Years ago, there was an exploit, and it wasn't even that bad of an exploit, but it was an exploit in which we were farming up high-level gear, XP, and other things within Anthem, which, by the way, didn't even have in-game, all right? And we sunk hundreds of hours into Anthem. Believe me, if there was in-game, we would have found it. Before you say cross, what about Grandmasters? Look, we did them all, okay? At the end of the day, there was no raid race going on. There was no major competitive edge you could have had over another player. There was no true in-game. Yet BioWare and EA took it upon themselves to ban Glad for taking advantage of an exploit that many of us were taking advantage of, which resulted in Glad just quitting Anthem. It simultaneously made a lot of us uncomfortable. Glad said it best here.
I see an opportunity, a more efficient, effective, smart way to farm loot. I'm going to use it, and so are many other people.
Ultimately, I'm not a game dev, nor am I an avid member of the Division community, but this feeling is very familiar to me. Why does an unlimited PvE progression system offer such huge PvP bonuses? Are bans and rollbacks being exclusively targeted at bad faith exploiters, or will innocents get swept up in it like Destiny speedrunners? In my opinion, guys, rollbacks are acceptable, but outright permanent bans for an exploit in the game, feel like that's pretty harsh. Division 2 very much still has a live and vibrant community with a dedicated player base who, by the way, some are very elated that these few bad apples will no longer be around to spoil the bunch. We do know that rollbacks are going to be going out, but personally, if I was to play a game and I was to find some way to gain an advantage in-game using in-game mechanics, even if it was a workaround, and I was to get banned, I'm just letting you know, guys, that would probably be it for me in that game. One of the most fun aspects, especially to a live service game, is when you discover something that gives you that advantage. And it could have been something as simple as like RuneScape back in the day, right? Like discovering ways to power level faster. We've made countless guides on how to farm for a number of resources inside of Destiny 2, some of those taking advantage of exploits. And this concerns me when Massive in the Division 2 and other developers start banning players for this kind of stuff, because I don't want this to happen in the games that I play. We'll see what ends up happening, guys. I'm curious to know how many people actually got permanently banned. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I very much would love to hear what the Division community has to say on this fact. As someone who has personally taken advantage of so many exploits, this right here, this scares me. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.